6, the case of State of Tennessee versus Andre Greer. In 2015 to 2016, this defendant, Andre Greer, aka Hollywood, was a leader in a criminal gang located here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The name of that gang was Athens Park Bloods. During the course of this trial, you may hear them referred to over and over again as APB. That's Alpha Papa Bravo, APB. And in 2015-2016, the gang had a problem. The problem was one of their members had been arrested and charged for inflicting violence upon a rival gang member. And that gang member who had been arrested and charged was Cortez Sims, aka AWAX. That's AWAX. Cortez Sims, on or about January 2015, in an effort to inflict violence upon a rival gang member, bursts into Bianca Horton's home. Bianca Horton is the victim in this case. And Cortez Sims proceeds to shoot his rival, Marcel Christopher, multiple times. Marcel survives. But in the process of inflicting violence upon a rival gang member, Marcel Christopher, he kills Talitha Bowman, Bianca's friend, who was also in the home. Also present in the home is baby Zoe, a small child, who's Bianca's child. And in the process of inflicting violence upon his rival, baby Zoe is shot, paralyzed, and left in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. This defendant then puts together an all-star team. He leads an effort to somehow fix the situation to which somehow he's responsible for. And to do that, he's going to recruit fellow gang members, and they're going to plan to kidnap, kill, and silence Bianca Horton in an effort to somehow get Cortez Sims, his fellow gang member, out of this jam. To somehow get Cortez Sims off the hook, if you will. To somehow, quote, free his little homie. That's going to be the words you're going to hear in this trial. What are you doing to free the little homie? And to do that, this defendant puts together a team to do just that. And they do that. The proof will be that they kidnap, kill, and ultimately silence Bianca Horton in an effort to deprive the state of a key witness and provide proof against Cortez Sims. Now, that goes down on or about May the 24th of 2016. Late in the evening of May the 24th, 2016, Bianca Horton is kidnapped. She is silenced. She is kidnapped and silenced because she had the audacity to stand up against the Athens Park Bloods. Seen here. Particularly, Cortez Sims is the one that inflicted that harm against her child. He is a member of the Athens Park Bloods. If you couldn't tell he's a member of the Athens Park Bloods, perhaps the APB tattooed across his head might give it away. He invades her home on or about January 7th, 2015. The police arrive. She tells them who did this. Cortez Sims is arrested and charged with the offenses shooting Marcel Christopher, killing Talitha Bowman, paralyzing baby Zoe. That's on March the 7th, 2015. There's baby Zoe. Approximately 2 months later, Bianca Horton goes to juvenile court. Cortez Sims has been arrested. He's in custody. And that building's a couple miles down the road from here. And because Cortez Sims is a juvenile at the time, they're doing what's called a transfer hearing. It's a legal method to hold somebody under the age of 18, depending on the circumstances of the crime, to hold them responsible as an adult. And that transfer is happening in juvenile court to have Cortez Sims' case brought down to this very building. And on that day, on March the 5th, Bianca Horton takes a stand. And she takes the stand, looks just like this, and she says, she identifies Cortez Sims. That's the one who did it, and I'm paraphrasing, but she identifies Cortez Sims as the person responsible for this. And the state will submit to you at that point, she was marked as an enemy on behalf of APB. See here. This defendant leads an effort, along with Courtney High on the right and Charles Shelton on the bottom, to kidnap, kill, and silence Bianca Horton so that Cortez Sims may not be held responsible for his crimes, a fellow APB member. And they do just that. On May the 24th, in the late hours, she is kidnapped, she is killed, she is silenced. Sometime around midnight, maybe in the last few minutes of the 24th, maybe in the first few minutes of the 25th. And she is dumped along the side of the road on Elder Street like a bag of trash. And now this defendant sits charged here for the indictment that General Wire just did. Now, a little truth in advertising here. General Williams, my compadre over there yesterday, gave you all a great rundown on circumstantial versus direct evidence. And he told you yesterday, there may not be any direct evidence in this case. And that may hold true. The state believes there will never be any proof of a witness who takes the stand who's going to say, I saw this person or that person hold a gun to Bianca and shoot her. I don't believe that's going to be the proof in this case. However, as I believe the court's going to tell you, and Mr. Williams touched on this yesterday, is that circumstantial evidence can be just as good as direct evidence. And in this case, the state will submit to you, the proof will be, there will be a mountain of circumstantial evidence. And I'm going to go through some of that with you right now. And it's just a snapshot. I'm not trying to pitch to you the entire state's case in these few minutes I've got. I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what you're in for this week. I also want to touch on criminal responsibility. I believe the proof is going to be that Bianca Horton was shot multiple times, potentially with either one gun or two. I don't believe the proof's going to be the firearms examiner, the expert from the FBI can tell if there was one gun or two. But clearly, you're going to hear from the medical examiner, she died of gunshot wounds and she was shot multiple times. The state believes the proof will be that we don't know who pulled the trigger. Only that the proof will be that this defendant, through his actions, as we talked on yesterday, criminal responsibility, aided or assisted another in the commission, or even attempted to aid or assist another in the commission of a crime with the full intent of what was about to happen. And the state believes the proof will be that he did just that, aided or assisted others in this kidnapping, killing, and silencing of Bianca. Now, it's important to understand the timeline of events in this case. All right, so if we're looking at it on a timeline, January the 7th, 2015, Cortez Sims busts up into Bianca's house to inflict this damage on a rival gang member. I see people right, so I'm going to try to slow down. On March the 5th, Bianca identifies Cortez Sims and testifies against him. March 5th. The case is transferred to this building, and on March the 23rd, 2015, they pick a trial date. That's what lawyers do. This date today, we picked out a year ago, whatever. You got to plan these things. But on March the 23rd, 2015, they picked a trial date. And that trial date they picked for Cortez Sims is September 27th, 2016. And so the focus of this week is going to be on the events that take place between March the 23rd and September 27th. Because as we get closer to the trial date, the stakes go up for Cortez Sims. And we're going to focus on what transpires between March 23rd, 2015 and September 27th, 2016. And particularly what happens in the middle, and you're going to hear from the proof that Bianca is killed on or about late on the 24th or early on the 25th. Check to make sure we're doing right here. Now here's a geographic overview of Chattanooga. And obviously you can see the Tennessee River running through here. We are downtown here, and we literally are sitting right there as steady as I can hold it. Now what this map depicts, amongst other things, is the gold icon or legend here is where Bianca lived. That's her apartment complex, the Stone Ridge Apartments. We'll talk more about that later on. Over here, the blue icon is 5930 Quintus Loop. I think that's like Waddington of North America. It's a manufacturing facility. It's where she worked. So Bianca, proof will be she lives approximately here, she works approximately here, and this CS is crime scene. This is where her body's found. So I want to give that to you all for orientation. This is an overview of where she works off Quintus Loop. It's taken from an airplane. This is an overview of the Stone Ridge Apartments, where she lives. Many more pictures about this later on. And late on the 24th of 2016, proof will be Bianca gets off work. She calls the babysitter. Normal thing to do. I'm coming home. So she tells the babysitter. The babysitter is waiting Bianca's arrival. Bianca's car arrives, but she is nowhere to be found. These are Bianca's possessions stacked up on top of her car the next morning. But Bianca is nowhere to be found. Bianca never comes in the front door, never relieves the babysitter, never comes home to her kids. Beside Bianca's car is a purse strap. Try that out thing. No purse recovered. A short while after, somebody calls in they found a body. The police respond, and they're starting to put things together. Because right now you've got in play a missing person over here. Now you've got a body found over here. And very quickly, the law enforcement authorities connect the two and figure out what's going on. Back to our map. In an effort to develop suspects, as General Wyatt read, because really we're starting from scratch. There's no direct eyewitness who saw people throw Bianca in a van. There's no direct eyewitness who saw people dump Bianca out of anything. So you're going to hear from an expert from the FBI. She's an expert on cellular communications. And she's going to tell you how a cell phone works. You get your cell phone out, and it connects to a tower. Which tower does it connect to? How does that figure out? How does that work? She's going to tell you about it. But law enforcement did something called a tower dump. And it's basically start from scratch when you don't have any suspects. So you go to the providers, the cell providers nearest. You have a couple known commodities here. You know where her car is, and you know her gear was stacked up on top of her car such that she got home, and you know the approximate time frame because you called the babysitter, so you got a place and you got a time. So they go to the cell providers and they say, give me every transaction off your cell tower for this day and time for this location. And they do that. And it'll show you thousands of events, as you can imagine, in a big city. And then, of course, they know what time she got off work. And they go to the area where she works, and they say to the providers with the towers over there, give me every event off of the tower where she worked for this time frame. And of course they do that. And of course we know where her body's found. And they say, give me every phone that tickled a tower, that touched one of these towers, in and around where her body was. And of course that leads police to develop some suspects. And I want to talk more about the cell phone business here in a minute. But they develop some suspects. And they get some phone numbers, as General Wilder told you. Some of these phone numbers show up in all three places. Actually, out of the thousands and thousands of phone numbers, only a handful, single digits, show up in all three places at all three times. And some of those numbers, the police are going to tell you, are connected to the Athens Park Bloods. So police say to themselves, let's go back and start listening to some of the jail calls of known APB members, not this defendant, of other known Athens Park Blood members. Let's just kind of listen to their calls and see what's getting talked about. Is there anything being said about this Bianca Horton business? And so now I want to go through some of what you're going to hear in these jail calls. Now keep in mind, again, on March the 23rd, we pick a trial date of September 27th. All right? So let's take a look at some calls that occurred between those dates and then a few calls after Bianca's killed. I'm going to go through those with you. And you should be able to hear these later on the trial. Again, I'm just giving you a snapshot. On April the 20th, 2015, Cortez Sims says a recorded call, two people say I did it. The little red N-word and the little bitch. Well, he's talking about the only two surviving adult witnesses from when he burst into Bianca's home. He's talking about Marcel Christopher and Bianca Horton. January the 29th, there's a recorded call from Cordell Collier. He's a known APB leader, gang leader, associate of this defendant. And Cordell Collier is talking to a lady friend with the last name of Ramsey. Miss Ramsey is the mother of Miss Sims. So he's talking to AWACS's mom. And Collier tells her, one half is okay, get up the dollars and take it to her. And ladies and gentlemen, the state submit to you, the proof will be they're trying to buy Bianca Horton off. On February the 8th, it's a three-way call. You ever done that on your phone? It's Cordell Collier calling AWACS's mom, Miss Ramsey, and she then three-ways in this defendant. And she says to this defendant, see behind me here, are y'all going to free the little homie? She's talking about her son. She wants her son off the hook. Are y'all going to free the little homie? And this defendant says, Andre Greer, we're doing what we can. A month and a half later, this defendant, Cortez Sims, is talking to his mom. And his mama tells him, I talked to your favorite brother. It's all him. Same day, AWACS is talking to this defendant. This defendant says, the lawyer is paid, got to get that, quote, other thing paid off. We're talking about the star witnesses. Got to get them paid off because there's more than one star witness. There's Marcel Christopher and there's Bianca. It's the most important thing. And rest assured, Bianca is a key witness in the case against AWACS. And then AWACS finishes the statement, because she can come to court. There is no mistaking what is being talked about. On April the 2nd, AWACS talking to this defendant. Greer tells him, your shit gonna get paid. We need to be worried about that other shit. 9 days later, Cordell Collier talking to this defendant, and you see it's slowly getting closer and closer to trial. It's crunch time. 2 days later, Cortez Sims talking to a lady friend. You have to stop Bianca. He is correct. He has identified the key witness in the case against him. 5 days later, Cordell Collier, again, an APB leader talking to this defendant, and this defendant tells him, we picked up a van for that other situation. You're going to hear this audio for yourself. About a month later, AWAC's talking to this defendant. This defendant tells him it can go one of two ways. This is a whole other ballgame. Clearly, the stakes are getting higher. And that is the last call of significance that transpires before Bianca is killed. So I put a red line there. And I just want to briefly touch on a few calls you're going to hear that occurred after Bianca was killed. August 12, 2016, this defendant is talking to a lady by the name of Raven Bragg. And she tells him Courtney High is bragging he killed Bianca. 4 days later, this defendant is found to have passed. You're going to hear testimony, something called a kite. It's basically a jail note. Right? Somebody passing a note from one person to another in jail. But there's a jail note found to be delivered, stated to be approved from this defendant, where he's telling another APB member, don't get on that thing. The thing being the witness. On September 10th, 2016, this defendant is telling somebody to get Diesel, who is I think a 6'7" mountain of a man who is an APB leader, get Diesel on High, reportedly in an effort to shut Courtney High up. And on May the 1st, you'll hear a call where this defendant is asking somebody to look up the law on cell towers. And that is correct, because there is cell tower evidence in this case, which I'm going to talk about more in detail. These three defendants are looking for more help. And they approach a fellow gang member by the name of Johnny Juice Clemens. Johnny is no peach. He has many felonies to his name, and he will be a witness in this case. Johnny will testify that Greer and Shelton tried to recruit him into the plan. He said, no, I don't want to part of that. That they mentioned, and this is before the homicide actually takes place, but they mentioned cutting cameras off some apartments. And of course, that's important because, guess what? 3 days before the homicide, this is the surveillance video from the Stone Ridge apartments where Bianca was. And 3 days before, these two people right here, it's a struggle to make out what they look like, other than the two human beings, walk up to this camera and knock it out, and it goes black. They tell Johnny Clemens the camera's at the Stone Ridge Apartments. And that's correct because Bianca lives at the Stone Ridge Apartments. They tell him that their plan is to kidnap her, to dump her off, which they did, and to get rid of her. And that's what Johnny Clemens is going to testify to. And this is approximately 2 or 3 months before she is kidnapped and killed. He also says Greer tells him he has a van. And you'll see from the jail calls that Greer himself says, I have a van for that other situation. When the police finally locate Mr. Greer in August of 2016, in the same residence where he's located is this blue backpack. In that blue backpack is this document you can kind of make out right here with the green and the white. And if you know what that is, that's a car title. And it's a car title to a Ford van. And as you know, because you probably own cars, vehicles have VIN numbers. And that VIN number matches this Ford white van that was later found abandoned at 5510 O'Leary. Johnny Clemens says they mentioned hopping gates to get to the cameras. And that is correct because the Stone Ridge has gates. It's a gated community. He has tools inside his apartment. And they also recruit Travis Martin, who is also no peach. He'd probably be here on loan from the Tennessee Department of Corrections. He'll probably be in custody when he takes the witness stand. And he'll probably be very unhappy. And he is a known APD member, associated with this defendant. And Travis Martin will testify that Greer tells him he has the van. And of course, you know from the evidence what the proof will be that Greer has a van. He tells police, and Travis Martin talks to police a couple times, but he tells police that he was told by Greer that they had painted it and everything. And guess what? 4 days before the murder, a Ford van was ready for pickup at a body shop here in Chattanooga. And that Ford van had just been repainted white. And the number, the contact number for who dropped that van off, is a number you'll hear this defendant talking on one of the recorded phone calls. This number is associated with this defendant. And of course, this is all several months prior, and when you look at what's going on several months prior, it's crunch time. Travis Martin says Greer, Shelton, and High talked of killing Bianca. That's these three. That Bianca is about to go to court against Cortez Sims. That is a true statement. And you will hear Cortez Sims say, they have to stop Bianca. That Travis Martin is told by this defendant that they have to handle the situation. Those are the words he used. He was told they have to handle the situation. And of course, that is the exact language you're going to hear in a phone call of this defendant, that they've got a van for the other situation. That Greer knows when Bianca gets off work. And that at a later conversation, after the crime is committed, Travis Martin is told by this defendant that this defendant didn't think that Shelton, a.k.a. Slick, that he didn't clean the van very well. And that is a correct statement because there are cleaning supplies in the van when it's found, along with a bag of cleaning supplies and Shelton's fingerprints on the cleaning supplies, as well as Shelton's DNA on the steering column. And so he is correct. Shelton did not clean the van very well. That Travis Martin says, Greer says Bianca will be at Quintus Loop. That's what he's told. And of course, that's correct. She is at Quintus Loop on the night of the homicide. Here it is right here. As I told you earlier, they did these cell tower dumps in an effort to develop, which numbers may be in which spots at which time. Here are the three locations they looked at: work, home, and where the body is. Time frames here because you know when she gets off work. Time frame here, she calls the babysitter, and then approximate time she's found shortly thereafter. Here's the overview of the map: home, work, where the body's found. And Special Agent Carla Rexon from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, we're going to seek to qualify her as an expert in cellular phones and analysis of all things cellular. And what she's going to tell you is that of the thousands and thousands of numbers she looked at, only a handful fit the bill for having been in all three places at all the right times. And one of those handful of numbers is this number here. And that is also a number you will hear this defendant's voice on. And she will tell you that somewhere between these two towers, the phone is active on the night of the 24th. And she will tell you this is consistent with someone surveilling somebody who would be working at Quintus Loop. Then later on, the phones are down in this area, more towards where Bianca lives. I'll let her explain it. She'll do a way better job than me. And then later on, from 9:46 to 11, the phones are moving this direction. And then between 11:14 and 11:34, she's looking at 3 different numbers. And the state believes the proof will be that we will show that all 3 of these numbers are associated with the Athens Park Bloods. And what we believe Special Agent Rex will testify is that at least 2 of these numbers are definitely traveling together. And if you look at where Bianca worked and looked at where she lived, it's consistent with her coming home. Shortly thereafter, the phones are going back east, which is where Bianca's body was found. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the state will submit to you, the proof will be that the phone evidence is consistent with the physical evidence. Lastly, and I'm about to wrap up here, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this trial, the state's going to ask you, if you had to paint someone's picture in the middle, someone who was responsible, criminally responsible, for leading the effort to plan, to aid, assist, in the kidnapping, killing of Bianca, whose picture would you paint in the middle? Well, I'll submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, it would have to be somebody with motive. And the proof will be in this case that only people with motive are members of the Athens Park Bloods. So we're down to about 80 to 100 people. So we're looking, whoever's picture belongs in the middle should be a member of the Athens Park Blood, who are presumably out to free the little homie and get rid of the star witness in the case against AWACS. And whoever belongs in the middle is involved in somehow freeing AWACS and is a member of APB and who has a white van, because you're not going to kidnap somebody in the VW Beetle. It's not very practical. So whoever belongs in the middle here has a van, they're trying to free the little homie, they're recruiting other people for help. So if you had to put somebody in the middle who's recruiting other APB members for help, has the means to do it, has the motive to do it, and has one of the only few cell phones that fits the parameter of somebody who could have done this, whose picture would you put in the middle? And ladies and gentlemen, the state will submit to you, the proof will be the only person's picture you can paint in the middle, be that of Andre Greer. At the conclusion of this trial, the state's going to ask you to find this defendant guilty as charged for all the counts that Joe Waddle read. And I look forward to hearing your verdict. Thank you very much. Do you have a way to take that down, Joe?
Good afternoon. You all made it down. Yesterday I talked a little bit about beyond a reasonable doubt. We talked a little bit about circumstantial direct evidence, and all of that stuff is really the most important stuff here today, because I think what you're going to see is that the state decided who was guilty before they started the investigation, and then they find evidence that supports their story. And that's why there's no direct evidence, there's only circumstantial evidence. And so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt is exactly what it sounds like. It's to a moral certainty. You're supposed to be pretty comfortable that you know what the facts are when you make a determination about guilt or innocence of somebody that's sitting over here at this table. Right? It's just been an allegation by the state so far. And even just based on what they just told you there, they don't have any real evidence. It's just what they think happened. So if you'll notice, all I'm going to ask you to do is pay attention to the witnesses. Pay attention to the actual evidence, and then you have to ask yourself, is that evidence reliable? What's the source of the evidence? Where did it come from? Some of you are scientists, probably analysts, and you've probably heard the term garbage in, garbage out. Well, if you take bad information and you run it through an analysis, you can only end up with a bad result. That's what garbage in, garbage out. Because facts, bad facts, or unreliable facts, analyzed, you cannot get a result that is certain, can you? You just can't do it, because you started out with unreliable facts. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is every single thing that they put up there, you should be asking yourself, is that a fact? Or is it what they say it is? Because even in the opening, he put up phone calls, and he said, we believe this is what that meant. We believe this is what that meant. No even direct statements, right? We talk about a van, He bought a van. So what you're going to see is every time they find evidence that doesn't support what their theory was, they just do away with it. And so that van is going to be very important, okay? He said he bought that van for this other little thing, but we don't really know what any of this is. They're just tying him into this prior murder. In fact, I think the DA said that he was trying to fix a problem that he was somehow responsible for, right? About the prior murder, before we were even talking about Andre Greer at all. We're talking about Cortez Sims, a teenager who went to a house and shot up at another gang member and hurt some folks. Mr. Greer's not involved in any of that. Their whole case comes down to the fact that they've associated him with a gang. And they think that the gang is the only people who would have a motive to kill Bianca Horton. The giveaway is that Bianca Horton already testified. She already testified. They already had her testimony. The only way that would help them would to change her testimony. Because killing her secures her testimony, doesn't it? It secures it. Under oath, she's already done it. By killing her, they secured her testimony. It makes no sense. That's not motive, y'all. It's not motive. Paying her off might have been motive, to get her to say something different. That would make sense, wouldn't it? If that's what they were trying to do. The killing her doesn't make any sense. She already testified. So, they start picking and saying, we got Andre Greer, we want Andre Greer, we know he's a member of this gang. And you're going to hear about a gang list, because they keep a list. If they associate these young men in these neighborhoods with a gang, then they put them on a list. And I think you're going to hear that you can't come off that list. You're on that list, you're associated. And you're associated because they put you on the list. That's scary, but I think that's what you're going to hear, okay? And so now we have this association of 20, 30, 100, whatever it is, young men, all in the same neighborhood, okay? All in the same neighborhood. All these gangs, we always hear about gang violence, and I do not want to downplay gang violence. It's horrible. Gang violence is horrible. And there's definitely collateral damage. But you're usually going to hear the collateral damage comes from inside the apartment where there were other gang members. It almost always happens, gang members shooting gang members. It almost always happens in these little neighborhoods. And I think that you're going to hear, even their witness, I'm not sure what they're going to say, because I don't think they're going to be happy to be here. But if there's anybody in here that they've associated with the gang, I think they're going to they may tell you about what their life was growing up in the neighborhood. They may tell you what it was like what their options were with regards to joining a gang or not joining a gang, or what their lifestyle's like. And if you wear red, you're in the Bloods. If you wear blue, you're in the Crips. Colors are a signal that puts you on that list. They just showed a picture of the three guys. Mr. Greer was wearing blue, wasn't he? I'll get you shot if you're a high-ranking Blood. Anyway, so here's the evidence. They don't have any. So they pulled some stuff out here. We've got this phone. We're going to talk about the cell phones. And when we talk about the cell phones, we're going to talk about science a little bit. We're going to talk about how they develop the method in which they determine the radius of the reach of these cell towers, okay? Because they're radio waves. Radio waves fall. So they have a reach. They put them up here, and the radio waves fall to a certain distance. And the way they test these things is they do a drive test. Somebody does a drive test, and they try their best to figure out where the outskirts of the reach of each tower is so that they can make sure that the towers are placed so that they overlap. Makes sense, right? That way you don't drop a call. So I think what you're going to hear from the phone expert is that they can't say that those phones were necessarily right there. They could have been there, depending on the type of traffic, how much traffic was going. That tower could have bounced to another tower. That's not direct evidence that even those phone numbers were necessarily the way they say they're going to be. I think that's what the testing is going to show. So again, circumstantial, right? Circumstances. Circumstances suggest. So I like to talk about circumstantial evidence like this. Do you guys remember, well, you can't answer me, but the old show Three's Company? Some of us are probably old enough to remember Three's Company. The entire premise of that show was basically someone listening through the door to something happening on the other side of the door that sounded nefarious in some way or another. And it was them misunderstanding what was being said because on the other side of the door, and the circumstances seemed to suggest something sexual or something was happening behind that door. And that would be the whole premise of the whole show. Almost every single show would be they misunderstood what was happening behind that door. That's circumstantial evidence. because there's always other circumstances that you don't know about. And that's the problem with circumstantial evidence. That's why it's hard to depend on. And when they say there's a mountain of circumstantial evidence, you have to look at each little piece. And you have to determine whether it's reliable, because a mountain of crud is a mountain of crud. It doesn't matter that it's a mountain. Okay? And that's what we're trying to decide. You can't just can't throw everything at it until you think that's enough. That's not how this works. He's presumed innocent. They have a duty to prove beyond a reasonable doubt every single element that they are alleged against this man, and they have to prove it with actual evidence, reliable evidence. It doesn't matter if you think he's guilty, that's not guilty. It doesn't matter if you think he's in a gang that might have been involved, not guilty. Because they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt every single element that he was involved in a first-degree premeditated murder, a conspiracy to commit murder, especially aggravated kidnapping. They want to put him to death for it with no direct evidence. Y'all better do the job, right? And our jobs are to hold them to their burden. It's important. And like I said before, your vote and your county vote might count 1 out of every 30,000 or something, that vote. And here's 1 of 12 in the end. 1 of 12. This is the most power you'll ever hold in your life, right now. I will never get a chance to hold that power. No one in their right mind would ever put me on a jury. Okay? But this is the most power you'll ever hold. So I'm asking you to take it seriously. I'm asking you to pay attention, not just to the story. You got to ask, is that what that means, or is that what they said that it means? Or is that what they said I think it means? Right? We believe that this means this. I think you're going to hear that a lot. It can only mean this, which is always wrong. Right? Which is always wrong. And I'm going to ask you to think about perspective, because we're going to hear a lot about training. We're going to hear about experience. And most of the people that like to talk about training and experience are police officers. And I used to be a prosecutor. I think very highly of prosecutors. I think very highly of police officers. Part of my job is to come in here and make sure they do theirs. Right? I've got to challenge them to make sure that they're doing theirs, because every time they don't do their job or they cut a corner, it takes away an individual right of us. And the only way that we get to challenge individual rights as criminal defense attorneys is by representing people charged with crimes. So I'm going to ask you to look at every single thing, how they gathered the information, whether it's reliable, whether the sources they're using are reliable, whether the way they gathered it makes any sense. I know that we have some folks that study science on this thing. Think about the scientific method, right? If you have a hypothesis, you test against that hypothesis until you have something that doesn't fail. Then you have a theory. And even then they still test against the theory, because it changes. Sometimes we learn new things. But you don't take a theory and pick and choose little things to make it work. Because if you're taking phone calls, thousands of jail phone calls, I guarantee you that I could pull out 30 jail phone calls from just about anybody who spent 3 years in a jail and put together a case against him based on the language that they used, talking to other members of their family and other people that they know by taking out little segments. I guarantee it. So don't let that be evidence before and after of this conspiracy to do this thing. There's no denying that Bianca Horton was murdered. You're not going to hear me argue that at all. She was murdered. As far as I know, she was kidnapped, but we don't really know. I mean, her stuff's on top of the car, like it's stacked up. I don't know if she got the car with somebody. I have no idea. We don't know. We're going to hear about the white van. There's no evidence in that white van. They're going to use the fact that it was clean. The fact that there's no evidence must be circumstantial evidence that there used to be evidence. That's a trick, y'all. Every time we find something and there's no evidence that doesn't support our story, well, they must have fixed it because they're so smart that they killed the only witness that could have saved their friend. My head's spinning. So there's no motive. There's no physical evidence. Absolutely no reason why he would want Bianca Horton dead. He's not on most of the phone calls you're going to hear, he's not in them. Whenever they refer to your favorite brother and all that stuff, they're going to say they're meaning him, they're meaning him, they're meaning him. They're going to try to paint him as this Svengali puppet master, Don Corleone figure of the APB. and the Athens Park Bloods are not the mafia. Street gangs are made up of 18 to 24-year-olds whose brains have not fully developed, who have guns and thinks they're cool. And every once in a while, there's a psychopath that starts opening up fire. Doesn't mean they're good. Doesn't mean it's good for the neighborhood. Doesn't mean any of that stuff. But the way to take care of it is not to start willy-nilly charging people who are associated with the gang with the most serious crime you can charge them with no evidence, and then try to put them to death. That's not the way to do it. That is not the way to do it. Your job is to make them do their job. My job is to make them do their job. I'm going to try to help you.